On this corner, fresh out of retirement, the Tigress of Gold, Black KRRSANTAN! Hello my friends and welcome back to Player Display. Today we're going to be having a little bit of a look at the Black KRRSANTAN figure from the Book of Boba Fett from Star Wars The Black Series. I don't know why I did that whole thing in reverse, but there you go. So this is actually a figure that I had on pre-order for a little while, then I dropped it, but I wound up seeing a whole bunch of him on Target on the racks. So I figured I'd pick one up just to see what's going on, and he looks great, but there are a few complaints that I have, especially since we were all getting the exact same Chewbacca mold for not only Chewie, but also the initial Black KRRSANTAN release, which is more based on the comics. We were hoping that we'd get better articulation, some better details, and just better presence on the overall shelf. And, well, we got two of those, I'd say. So we'll go over the one missing factor when we get into articulation. It's kind of a disappointment there. But as for the rest of it, it's pretty neat. So let's go ahead and start with the box. It looks like we're still going to be seeing some green packaging for a few months to come, at least until the new plastic box waves roll out, which might be a little bit of a while, but as for this box here, looking pretty crisp and shiny, and I like it a lot. We have a very good profile image of Black KRRSANTAN over here, although one thing that bugs me a little bit is down here we just have KRRSANTAN, not Black KRRSANTAN. They like changing the names of certain parts of Star Wars, like Boba Fett's ship, the Slave One, is now the Spitfire, which is really, I'm not going to get into it, it's just Disney's doing some weird things, but anyways, he's just KRRSANTAN now, apparently, but not in our hearts. He is Black KRRSANTAN. That's who he is. Then over here, we have him once again to complete that Book of Boba Fett mosaic of really beautiful profile shots. Love that artwork a lot. On this side, we have Black KRRSANTAN once again, and when we go ahead and push on in, we have his many bios, multilingual, of course, as usual. Very interesting backstory. I think he goes as far back as the original trilogy in the comics, and he might even be in Legends. I'm not totally sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Down here, a whole bunch of warnings that we don't really care about or are ever interested, except for a good old friend,
Sad Onions!
On this side, we get Black KRRSANTAN once again, with his one accessory being this big old Mamma Jamma assault rifle of some sort. Never seen it before. Now let's get close and personal with this absolutely terrifying Wookiee bounty hunter. This is technically a deluxe figure, meaning that it has some extra paint apps, some bonus accessories, well, you'd hope anyways, but usually something is under the deluxe banner, which when it's either on the bigger side or if it has a lot of props to go with it. In this case, obviously it's in the former category, and yeah, it definitely punches that in, I think, especially when we're talking about the really massive head sculpt. And honestly, sculpt-wise, I think they did a very beautiful job. I think that's the strongest point of this figure. Starting off with the face, it looks very dog-like, as any Wookiee should. Reminds me of my late dog Felix a little bit, so it makes me a little sad, but it also makes him a tad endearing as well. Peering on in a little bit, we have some, looks like gray eyes. It's really hard to see under all the black fur. Although they did a very nice job with the mouth, painting in each one of the teeth. I love that a lot. A little bit of red under there, poking underneath the mouth, looking very sharp. As for the nose, again, very dog-like. Almost looks a little bit wet. That's also very cute, I think. Down here, we almost have these braids going on with these gold clasps to bulge it out a little bit in between each segment, coming down to 3 little points down here, down to the torso, which we'll get to in a minute. You also have more of those braids going on towards the back. I really love the asymmetry here. We have 2 over on this side, the 1 over here, and that's good not only aesthetically, but it also allows us to pin in the assault rifle, which I will show to you later. As for the armor, we've already gotten a pretty good look at it as we've been spinning him around, but we have 2 really awesome looking shoulder pauldrons. You can see there's a little bit of an etched in design on each one. They're both identical, but you also have 7 really good looking spikes. Not sharp to the touch at all. They're a little rounded off, which is totally alright. As for the belts that we have over here, very reminiscent of Chewbacca. We have 2 bandoliers kind of crossing over each other into this mid-belt over here, with pretty much the same design that's on the shoulders, I think. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of AVP for some reason, but I like that quite a bit. And then onto the back, instead of that design, you have a little bit of that peg hole for the blaster. Down to the waist, we get a belt, this time with a slightly different insignia, also looking very beautiful, very ornate and ancient looking. I'm loving it a lot. Get more of that gold going all the way around, and a single big leather looking pouch over here with a little bit of a black wash, which is always nice to see. Something I've mentioned for other Black Series figures is sometimes when Hasbro gets around to the back, they kind of stop worrying about paint, which is kind of unfortunate. You could kind of say that with the fur, I guess. Like, it loses the gray wash, which you see on the front. That's a little baggy. They gave it a little bit of extra attention, so I do appreciate that. As for the arms and the legs, they are both done in a very nice black color, but then of course we have the gray wash as we just discussed. A little bit heavy-handed, I feel like, in some spots. Like over here, I feel like the gray kind of takes over a little more than it probably needs to, but it still looks beautiful regardless. And then as for the hands, they have some knuckle dusters, which I like overall, but I feel like there is definitely some paint swap. I mean, slop. Paint slop. There we go. I'm a little tired today. I've been working hard. But especially over here, I feel like the gold should be panning a little bit in between the furry rivets going on. And over here, it kind of gets, well, I guess maybe that's the intent. If we go in a little closely, you can see it's not really hand painted. It looks like it might be printed on, maybe? I'm not sure anymore, but I just feel like the paint apps could be a little cleaner on the knuckle duster. So over there, it's not too great. And then over here, let's have a little closer look as well. Yeah, you can see it's a little bit muddy down here towards that second one. They're not great. I don't know. I just feel like they could have done a little bit more to bring them out. And one thing I really wish they would have done, and I think they did that with the vintage collection version of him, is give him a little bit of that electric effect on the fist that you could remove, then put back on. I think that would have been great, especially since I prefer him as a brawler as opposed to a shooter. I'd probably just have the blaster on his back, or not even there at all. I just don't even think he really needs it to have his presence, especially since he's a gladiator. I think a blaster would kind of be cheating, right? One additional detail I forgot to mention is we have, I can only imagine, is a pelt of another Wookiee or something over here. Just a nice little add-on to give him a little bit more storytelling. This is a place where I feel like it could have used some of a wash, maybe similarly to what they did with the pouch on the back. Just a little bit of black here, I think, would have helped a little bit. I mean, he's Black KRRSANTAN. I think all the black wash in the world would definitely help to improve him just a little bit. And then down to the feet, we have 10 nubby looking toes, just painted in a slate brown. Again, they could have painted in the toenails a little bit, so they missed a few little spots. But as for the sculpt, though, I think they did everything pretty much just right. Looking very solid. Here we are at his blaster, which is absolutely enormous, and I think brand new. Although it is a little bit familiar, it reminds me of some other figures that we've seen in the past. Like, I think up here we have the two scopes. Not too sure how that works, but I've at least seen that on, I think, Chewie's bowcaster, if I'm remembering right. And then on the end, we almost have this blue wear to the end of the barrel, which kind of reminds me of the Death Trooper. It was a little bit more rainbowy. Not sure what you call that effect. Let me know in the comments, because, again, I'm not a gun guy, don't know those terms, but, yeah, it's a pretty straightforward accessory. I'm glad that they do have paint at all. They could have just left it off, but it is deluxe, so they did add in just a few extra little details, like they got the two red indicator lights over there, and we already talked about the blue. We have silver along the barrel, though. And as for the rest, pretty much just standard gunmetal gray, nothing too exciting, but it's a good, hefty weapon, well sized for our giant Wookiee over here. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and try getting it into his hands, which is probably one of my other gripes with this figure. So you can get it in his righty pretty okay. You just gotta kind of squeeze it through, then it pops in. Pretty alright, but then the issue is getting him into a two-handed pose, which it can be done, but it doesn't look that fantastic, so both wrists getting a little early on articulation. They hinge in and out, I believe. Does this one as well? Yeah, they do. It's a little strange because it's kind of like on a diagonal. I'm not sure if you can make this out. Right there, you can see it's not totally straight through for in and out, but not really for up and down either. It's kind of at a diagonal, so I don't know, maybe that's just an alternative they're trying, kind of a mean between extremes, but I wish they would have just chosen the in and out. That would have been a lot better suited for this figure. But anyways, getting him back to the blaster holding position, let's give that a shot, no pun intended. You can see we can get the blaster over, but you can't really get him aiming down the sights too well, and if we want him holding the lower side of the blaster, we got to bend out the fingers, which is not the most pleasant thing to do. It's malleable, but gotta shove it a little. There we are. But then when you do that, it kind of pops out of the other hand. So you could see it's already a little bit dicey of a process. So you can hold it down idle, looking pretty okay. But you can pop in a little bit there. He still looks pretty good. Like, if you just want to get him in this pose, I think you're all set. But if you want him to be looking down the sights, though, it is very tricky because the head articulation is very stiff. I think there is some in there. It's just because of the shoulder pads kind of hovering. You see there's one that's going up, there's one that's going down. It's extremely finicky, so it's really hard to move the head much at all. Like, let's try, I don't know, moving a shoulder pauldron over the head sculpt a little bit because of that fur. There we go. And then would that allow us to move the head? Not really. You can't really have him looking straight forward. It's a little bit off to the side. Like, I guess you can kind of use some camera trickery. Like, if it's like that, kind of, not really. So, yeah, it's a good looking blaster, but between the articulation and the sculpt of the figure, it's not the best complement to what we have over here. So, not perfect, but it looks good overall when you have him in an idle stance, just like this. So, not too bad, but as a deluxe figure with an upscaled price, there's a lot more we can be asking for. Although I will say one nice feature of the blaster that I think they did actually get right is that you do have a little bit of a peg right here, which is not too intrusive, not too bulky looking. It looks like it's part of the main weapon, so that's totally fine. But you see that little hole that we talked about in the back there? All you gotta do is take that little square peg, plug it into the hole, and it stays in pretty well. It's not falling out of it, it's not too loose or anything, not too tight either, but yeah, from the front, it looks pretty natural. I don't know how he could sling it over to his back. I mean, especially that big old pad in the way, but it's there, so it's nice to have that option if you want him just going fisticuffs with someone else. But yeah, aside from that, nice little detail. I don't even think I'll be needing this at all. I just like him to be roaring and doing some whamming down on some folks, you know? But that's pretty much it there. Now, even though this is a totally brand new figure with a brand new body mold, one thing they definitely neglected is articulation. I don't think they made a whole lot of nuances at all in way of improving previous Wookiees we've seen in the past, like Chewie, Zalbar, and the previous KRRSANTAN we've got. But anyways, it serves its purpose all right, but it could definitely be better. I could see them installing some double joints in the elbows and stuff like that, but anyways, digressing. Onto the head, I think it's just a swivel. Might be a bowl, like, got a little tilt forward, not as much back because of the dreadlocks, and then you also got the armor kind of padding it out. A little bit to the sides, and then it could probably improve if you move the armor pads out of the way. And then, oh, you know what? It does, actually, so that might be the way to go. Move those out of the way, then move the head, then push these back up, and then he'll look. But, I mean, not by much more than what we already saw, so that's not the best, unfortunately. As for the arms, they swivel, they go all the way around if it weren't for the armor, but they still move just fine. Elbows, they hit pretty much 90, but they do swivel, so that helps a little bit. Both hands swivel, and they have that awkward, not really in-out, up-down joint. It's more in-out than anything else, but they move just the same. As for the torso, it looks like we have a ball joint under the pec area, so between that and the waist, it looks like we got that much forward, a little back. We got some tilt, so that's actually okay. Nothing at all in the waist, though. Down here on the legs, there's no thigh cut. I feel like that's definitely a place where they could have included it, because we've seen it on smaller figures in the past. There's just a lot to be desired with this figure. But anyways, he can kick forward, good 90. I could see him definitely kicking someone in, so that looks pretty good. Going back, you got kind of a rubbery butt fur over here, so he can go all the way back to almost 90. So that's pretty good. You can get him running forward a little bit if you like. As for knees, they come down to 90. And then as for the ankles, we have not much back, a little bit more forward, and then you do have a little bit of rocker. So pretty much the word of the day when it comes to articulation on this guy is 90. It's pretty much the best that we're getting with any joints on this figure. So that's very unfortunate, but he looks great, so it's kind of a pick and choose. Like, he's not a must-have, but he's still pretty interesting. Off to size comparisons we go, starting off with his two bosses. First, we have the Obi-Wan Kenobi variant of Darth Vader, but of course, after he died, he sought employment with some two Hutt twins, and then we also got his third boss, or fourth, I suppose, being Boba Fett from the Boba Fett show. I mean, that's kind of the point of this figure. Then over here we have, this is the Amazon exclusive Chewie that came with a C-3PO over his back. Every single Wookiee that we've seen so far came with this body up to this point with Black KRRSANTAN, and this sculpt is shorter than Chewbacca. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I'm actually totally good with that. I mean, I'd suspect if a Wookiee's going to be a little wider, maybe they'll be a little bit on the shorter side. So, and Wookiees come in different shapes and sizes, so that's totally fine by me, although it would have been kind of cool to see him up to here as well. Then over here, I also threw in a Gamorrean just to have a stout, pudgy-looking fellow, just another alien to compare him with. But of course, no size comparison is complete without our favorite friend, Star Wars Black Series, Mechamuck!
You loser! Even the Gamorreans have better articulation than you!
This figure is admittedly a little bit disappointing, if I'm going to be totally honest. It's a deluxe release, which means that he should come with a lot more than this typical Black Series figure should. In this case, of course, he's a little more bulky, he's got some extra paint work going on, and he's got all of that. But the big weight on this guy's shoulders, aside from his shoulder pads, is that, of course, he's a Wookiee. We want to see an updated body mold with better articulation. And I thought that even in spite of them just having single joints, it's still go a lot further than they'd let on than what would meet the eye, because we have been seeing single joints lately that are deeper cut and allow them to go past the 90-degree point, but in this case we don't get that. So honestly, it's really just articulation that bums me out a little bit. Everything else though, the paint apps, the weapon, the way that the weapon hinges onto the back and all that, it's a great looking figure. I think he's beautifully done. It's just the movement department that I think does have a lot of issues. Especially since he's a former gladiator, you'd want him to be running around some dudes, beating a whole bunch of people up, ripping Trandoshan's arm out. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of missed opportunities with this figure in way of articulation, but I think everything else is pretty acceptable for Black Series. And Black Series has been a little bit boring lately. I feel like they're not pulling out the really awesome side characters or re-releases that we've been wanting. So it's a little bit out of slog at the moment, at least for me. They're working on the newer content. But still, every now and then, there's going to be a character like Black KRRSANTAN who I do want to check out. And in this case, while the articulation does hamper me, I think the rest of him is pretty cool. I mean, if you just get him in an idle pose like this, you can kind of work with him. So not the worst, but not the best either. I definitely think it's one of those figures you could wait to go on sale. I don't think you need to go out of your way to pre-order him right now or go out and get him right now. I think you can definitely wait on it. But if you definitely feel like you want to get him, then it's not a bad figure by any means. It's just he is kind of disappointing when you compare him with the Wookiees we've seen in the past and how much time they've had to improve the formula. But I guess that being said, if we pull in Chewie again, I mean, on the standard body, it didn't even reach 90. So in that light, they have improved it a little bit, but still, I mean, there's no excuse. They could have gone a lot further, especially because he has the deluxe tag on him. I mean, when you throw in that word, that means a lot more should be going into the figure. But all that being said, so pretty happy. Hope you guys like him too. Let me know what you think. So if you enjoyed this little review and enjoyed content we've had in the past and are looking forward to more in the future, then please, as per usual, be sure to
Like, comment,
ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals, and subscribe.
This is the editor speaking, humbly reminding you to support the pod Patreon in the description to guarantee new content every single week.
Thank you guys very much for watching. Rock on, and I will see you all later.